Hi everyone, it's Miss Torres. So I'm going to go over the directions for the Loteria assignment. You should have watched the video kind of showing how to play Loteria, but just in general, Loteria is a similar to bingo, where you call out a number and you have to, if you get a certain number, you win a prize. Except for this, you're not calling out a number, you're calling out a type of card with an image and a description, usually have some sort of cultural importance. And instead of like doing a diagonal line or one line, you have to fill the whole thing up. And so this is a very traditional kind of Mexican American game that I grew up playing. A lot of people grew up playing, and so we're going to use this kind of Mexican American Latino game in order to affirm our own identities, even if you don't necessarily belong or not a part of the Latino or Mexican communities, right? So even though we're using something within a particular community, we're going to apply it to all of us because we all can share our identities and what things are important to us using this game. So let's go over a little bit of the history. So this game was actually not the way that it's played now, but the kind of idea from it was, the history goes, it came from Italy pretty early on during colonization, and it was quickly adopted in what would later become Mexico. And so there's all these different versions. It became associated with Mexican cultures and communities. And then that was also, as Mexicans were in what would later be called the United States, and then later be called Mexico, later be called California, Arizona. Like there's been this kind of constant um, family kind of community time around Loteria. But the images have changed. So if you look at these are not the images we associate with Loteria. Some of them are in their early forms. But a company created the Loteria cards. That was the one that people started buying. And so those images became associated with the Loteria cards. In the last 5 years or so, there's been a lot of changes to the cards, like based on current culture, current things that are going on, and also a desire to do better because some of the Loteria cards are based on some stereotypes that people don't really think that we should be a part of anymore, right? So this is kind of in line with the let's do better, let's have Loteria cards that are based on our own personal identities and are not like having these big like stereotypes based on certain groups, right? And so, for example, this isn't really like a, nothing really wrong with this. It's just that how can we do better with this card? And that would be making sure there's some sort of a gender balance, that we're not associating musicianship with only men, right? Same thing here. We have El Valiente and El Borracho. Those are kind of negative depictions of what it means to be a man, like violent and drunk. And that's especially associated with this kind of Latino stereotype. And so we want to make sure that, we can do better. We can have better images and better cards associated with more positive aspects of what it means to be a man, or reshaping that. And we can represent that in our Loteria cards. Similar idea with women. This is like La Dama, like the lady. Do women have to wear skirts? Do they have to wear heels, right? And so there's nothing wrong with this card necessarily, but like, again, how can we do better? How can we have a more um, diverse depiction of what it is to be a woman or femme, or feminine, right? And so there's activists, there's doctors, there's all kinds of ways women exist. And so we can represent that on our Loteria card. If it wasn't clear yet, you're going to be creating a Loteria card for you. So similar to this, right? With the white border, a number, and then some image that represents you, your culture, your community, or any of your personal interests. And again, this is a game played in a lot of Mexican households, but your card is going to represent you. So that could again represent your culture, your community, or anything that you like. Like if you're into skateboarding, your card could have a skateboarder, right? There's a bunch of things that it could be. So this one I wanted to highlight because there's a couple cards in the deck that focus on labeling a specific racial or ethnic group, and you really don't want to do that. Remember, these cards are really old, and so maybe this showing a Apache was considered okay, but it's really based on a stereotypical image of what it is to be an indigenous person. And this is not any traditional um, dressing of Apaches. Apaches didn't dress like this in history and now. And so it's based on stereotypes, right? And so we don't want our cards to look like this. So we can reimagine if we want to have our cards focusing on like indigenous history, indigenous culture, then we can do that. We can have a card that's on Jingle Dance, which is a very famous, very beautiful dance that is done at powwows every year at the various powwows that happen across the nation. We have water protectors who've been fighting against various land desecration. So you could have like a water protector Loteria card. So it can still focus on like indigenous people, but it's focusing on behaviors and individuals and jobs, not necessarily a card that's like, this is what an Apache is like. It would be like if you had a card that said the Mexican, right? That's not really appropriate. But you could have other things like instead of saying the Mexican, it could be a Day of the Dead card. And that's a huge part of my culture, right? It could be, certain foods that are indigenous to Mexico, like corn or squash, right? Those came from Mexico and Central America, right? So there's other ways that you can display culture and community that are not based on stereotypes or a drawing that's based on things that are not true. And then we also want to make sure that whenever we are creating a Loteria card, that we're not speaking for a whole people. So even if I am Mexican, right? I wouldn't put the Mexican because my card is not representative of all Mexicans, right? I would say Day of the Dead. I would say, elote. I would say things that are part of my culture. I wouldn't have a card that represents a people because whenever you start trying to have an image representing a group of people, you're almost always going to be relying on stereotypes, even if it's the community that you come from. So there's a couple cards like this in the traditional Loteria deck. This is just the one that I'm showing, but there's a few in there, and they're all kind of they're not the greatest. We could do a lot better than that. General directions. So 1-inch border. It has to have a number that's meaningful. You can choose the language, whatever your home language is, or if you want to use English, or it can be bilingual. It's completely up to you. It should be affirming. So we don't want images that are like showing you or your community in a negative light. Although that is subjective. So if what you're thinking, if you're showing something that's positive and you think it's positive, then you should be okay. But just make sure you're affirming. You're like, it's something that, you want to showcase. It's something that you're proud of. Okay. And then there should be some sort of description on the back. So some sort of explanation of what you did and why you chose it. And your teacher is going to be, your teacher as well as you all, if you want it, is going to be picking out some of the ones that are clear to be like really artistic, or some of the ones that have a really good message or show a lot of effort, and then that will be returned to me so we can try to showcase some of those. And there's no limit. You can have 5. You can have all of them if you think all of them, if they're all of them are beautiful and finished and really did a good job. On the back, you're going to write your name, make sure your first and last name, and a quick explanation. I'm going to go over some examples. So this doesn't have the border, but it has the number. This is the traditional Loteria card, right? The flag. This is a pride flag. So this is showing like a pride flag. So it's still a flag, but it's the pride flag. And obviously this person is showing that they're proud of being LGBTQ+. So similar image, but a different focus. This is the same image, same number, except the phrase is different. So instead of just El Sol, they're saying global warming, right? Because that's a condition, that's something that people are worried about right now. It's very in tune to what is happening today, right? So the bell, and instead of it being a bell, they're calling it the notification. Again, very today, very what's going on now, social media, you're getting your notifications. This one's 3 different versions of or 2 additional versions of La Mano, the hand. So El Nerd, so that's like the Star Trek thing. And that person's embracing the word nerd. And I embrace it nerd. I'm pretty nerdy myself. And then this is a La Causa, which is like kind of social justice protest version of a hand. So we have La Dama, the lady, and this one, they have the same image, slightly altered, and with a different phrase, the feminist. And these happen to be in Spanish, but they can be in any language. It doesn't have to be Spanish if you're not a Spanish speaker. The hipster, Spider-Man, Twitter, right? So it can be culture, or it can just be based on your personal interest. It's really up to you. La Quinceañera, El Uber. This is like a brand new one. This is kind of a reimagining of another one. El Menudo, La Concha. These are Selena-inspired Loteria cards. El Paletero, El Jardín. These are cultural as well, right? Like the Paletero is a huge part in my neighborhood. They're all the time. That's a big part of my neighborhood. So that's definitely a cultural representation that I identify with. Okay, so you're going to use this time to brainstorm. You're going to be working on your card Tuesday and Wednesday. So you have to, it would be great if you could decide what you're going to focus on. Are you going to do cultural? Is it going to be based on personal interest, maybe a mix? You're going to start drafting your image, sketching it out on just a piece of scratch paper that you have for yourself. Hopefully you still have your color pencils. If not, it's just going to have to be pencil only. But now that you know that you're going to be doing this Tuesday and Wednesday, so you might want to bring extra stuff if you have it. Ask your teacher what they're willing to share or not, because you're supposed to have your own color pencils. And then decide on the phrase. What are you going to put? What language is it going to be in? Is it going to be bilingual? You can put both languages if you want, multiple languages. It's really up to you. This is about like you and your culture and your community and your interests. And we're using this traditional Mexican Latino game, family game. And a lot of folks have a lot of like dear memories associated with this game. And so that's really it. So you're going to have a couple days to do this, and good luck. Have fun.